guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is an entitled people story. Homeowners associations, also known as HOAs, can be a nightmare to deal with, and I know this from personal experience. When my wife and I were looking for our first home at the young ages of 24 and 25, we spent months researching areas and houses that would be perfect for us and our future children. Finally, we found a house that was perfect for us, with a great price and in a nice neighborhood. Everything seemed perfect at first, but as soon as we parked our RV in our driveway to pack for a trip, we quickly learned that our neighbor was on the board of the local HOA and was a bit of a control freak. He stormed over to our house and demanded that we remove the RV from his neighborhood or he would have it towed and fine us for every hour it was there. I tried to reason with him, but he was irrational and screamed at me inches from my face, forcing me to threaten to call the police if he didn't leave. Later that day, a big rig tow truck arrived with a letter from the HOA stating that our RV was in violation of their rules and had to be towed, with a fine of $1,500. I refused to let the truck on my property and called my friend's father, who was an attorney, for legal advice. He advised me to write a $500 check and bring all the papers I received when purchasing the house and the current letter I just received. The attorney then sent a friendly letter to the HOA board and our neighbor, telling them to leave us alone. Despite this, we continued to receive fines of $1,500 a day, which we turned over to our attorney. Each time he sent a set of letters and contacted the USPS to report the incidents, as putting mail into people's mailbox is a crime. Things got even more intense when Mr. Crazy Neighbor summoned me to appear before the board, using an actual legal document improperly. I hired my attorney again for another $500, and we waited for the date they made. They tried to keep my attorney out of the room on some board privacy rule, but quickly shut up when he began going over their own rules that they were violating. My wife and I decided to start a disband the HOA campaign since she worked part-time from home during this mess and had all the free time in the world. Over the next 2 months, she went around getting to know our neighborhood and discovered that a lot of people disliked the HOA and the power-hungry seniors who acted like dictators. The HOA attempted to stall everything by holding no meetings and began their own campaign trying to change HOA rules to keep from being ousted, including distributing a racist flyer and letter to everyone explaining the dangers of not having an HOA. Fortunately, the neighborhood rallied together and started a fund to pay us back what it cost us to get the attorney started and the continued costs he had. After a few weeks of failed fear campaigns, a meeting was finally held, and a vote was called by using their own rules. The HOA was no more, and all remaining funds were to be dispersed back to the homeowners and members equally. Many former board members sold their homes and moved, including Mr. Crazy Neighbor. It was even reported in the news due to the racist letters by the HOA, but I couldn't find any articles to show you. In the end, we learned that if you want to buy a home in an HOA, you should plan to hire an attorney to make sure you don't get caught up in a mess like we did. The next story is titled "Called Police on My Entitled Son." Recent update: I spoke again with the GH and they suggested again my willingness to terminate my parental rights like my ex-husband did. The caseworker said she thought it was best because then they could get OS help without XMIL interfering. The CW also told me that they'll have to investigate the allegations against my spouse even though she knows they aren't true. I recorded the call. She said OS is the worst they've seen and needs intensive help. I've signed papers for him to get treatment, but my ex-mil also has a say and is refusing. They want her out of the picture. I'm not sure what to do. I know this cold affect my YS. The CW said if this goes to court that my ex-mil is planning on using my YS as her defense, saying I play favorites and provide more for YS. The CW says she understands the situation but the judge probably won't. Ex-mil is also playing the card that my husband won't provide for OS. This is not correct, but my husband has never had any legal obligations to do so. My husband is livid. He said he's tired of OS disrupting our home. He says that OS is not welcome here and that I need to sign the papers. Okay, so here's a recent update. I had a meeting with his in-house therapist this morning and the therapist and group home admin suggested sending him to a therapeutic foster home or a one-on-one psych unit as he is just too much for them to try and rein in. He's made sexual and physical threats to female staff and just been defying everyone. Even though my ex-husband signed his rights over to his mom, ex-mil the GH staff tried contacting him and my ex and his wife told them to never call again, that they don't want OS around their girls because he's been violent towards them in the past. The in-house said OS needs more help than she can give him and he seems to undermine her because she is a she. He has a true disrespect for women. I tried talking to him before I left and he said again, if I didn't tell them I lied then he'd not speak to me. I told him if that's what you want but you aren't coming home. He said to me, in front of everyone that he was coming home and we'd all be punished for this when he did. I told him that's not happened. OS said if I took him home today then my punishment might not be as severe. I told him he's not doing anything to me, he said, we'll see idiot. And I walked away. The problem with the therapeutic home is nobody in our area is willing to take him due to how violent he is and if goes to a psych ward he will be locked down 23 hours a day. OS is also trying to put this on my spouse, saying his stepfather is to blame and if the courts would make my husband leave OS behavior would change. This is not true. He's just trying to cause me more problems. I told them my spouse has had very limited interaction with OS and has had no disciplinary action towards OS. The GH gave me OS phone, shoes and other personal belongings. I went through the text on his to ex-mil after my husband did some sort of magic to unlock the phone and OS jokes with ex-mil about killing me, how he deserves to have my home to himself and how his little brother is an abomination, because YS father is my second husband. Ex-mil is religious and doesn't believe in divorce. The phone is a prepaid phone so I'm going to deactivate it and put it away in case I need it for evidence. I texted ex-mil and told her I had his phone and would be keeping it in the next messages. She went nuclear powered because she knows she's busted. She started saying things about my deceased father and trying to OS deflect the blame. I can't wait to see what lies she comes up with now. I'll know in a few days what the plan is, whether they can find someone to take him or if he's going to a lockdown unit. The judge said he can't come back to my house because the courts fear for the safety of my younger child. CPS is also involved now and the CPS worker asked if I'd be willing to sign OS over to the state completely and I said absolutely not. Okay, so I've noticed a lot of comments saying I abandoned my son, gave him to his paternal grandma ECT. That is not the case. I live in a Commonwealth state with no grandparents' rights and she had 25+ years of residency in a state that does have them. When I left her son, my ex-husband, she became furious. In her home state a grandparent has the right to intervene in the child's life during the parent's divorce and she used that to her advantage. A judge in her home state granted her visitation with my son even though he was born in my state. During a visit she filed for custody and was granted it until the divorce was finalized. The divorce took over 2 years due to my ex not wanting to sign papers and being difficult, so OS was almost 10 when it was finalized. I got something called a change of venue accepted and the custody case was transferred to my local court where it should have been their entire time. Of course ex-mil wasn't going to willingly hand him over so she kept filing appeals, continuances and other things to prolong the case. It eventually went from family court to circuit court, which is also known as high court, for that judge to decide. By this time OS was at the legal age where he could have a voice in court and was established at a school in ex-mil's area. The judge said OS could finish school there and then be transferred up here for school. My ex-husband had signed his parental rights over to his mom and the judge had to take that into consideration. He did this to avoid the state going after him for support. The local judge ordered ex-mil to do therapy as well as OS and there were issues with them not complying. My ex-mil ruined her own son. He is in his 30s, won't work, doesn't drive and expects her to keep him up. I did nothing wrong aside from leaving my abusive ex-husband. The recent psych evaluation said OS lacks empathy for others and has delusions of grandeur or whatever it's called, meaning he thinks he's better than others. Ex-mil also had to do a session and the therapist said ex-mil is similar I'm regards and that her expectations aren't realistic. They both have superiority complexes. My ex-mil used to lock me out of my own home because she wanted to punish me or limit my contact with my own son. When she took him I did contact local and state police but they couldn't go into her state without the permission of officials there and by then she'd filed paperwork. She had nothing to use against me, would not abide by court-set visitation ECT. I have 2 homes, a business and am very self-sufficient. My family life is good, not dysfunctional. We've done everything we can to incorporate my son into our family but he's refused to accept. I'm sorry I'm a crap mom for not allowing him to lock me out of my own damn house. For context, I, F35, have a son that was born when I was married to my first husband. I was young when he was born and his father was abusive to me. My ex-husband's mom was constantly in our lives, trying to take over and make my son hers. I left my ex when I was in my early 20s and my ex Mill ended up taking my son into another state and filing for custody. She went to a state that has grandparents' rights as ours didn't. I fought her for years and ended up getting remarried to my current spouse, and we had a son together when I was in my mid-20s, a boy who is now 10. I see my oldest son only during the summer and the holidays. I finally got the court case moved to our local court and the judge said that I was wronged and ordered shared custody and visitation. My ex Mill made a huge deal that son needed to stay with her during the week because of school, and the judge went with it so he could finish high school in an environment he was familiar with. My ex Mill has ruined my son, just like she did her own. She's given him any and everything he's wanted and asked for. She's taught him no respect and kept him very sheltered. She literally jumps on people if they don't give him his way. So in turn my son is loud, violent and all around sad to be around. So he came up to visit during Halloween and showed his ass awful. My husband's mom lives with us and she isn't well, she's doing chemo. She's been a big help with my youngest son so that I could help my husband with our business. My youngest is a delight to be around. He's polite, funny and respectful. We've taught him that you don't expect anything unless you work for it. I went and picked my oldest up and his attitude started right away because his phone died and the charger I had in truck didn't fit his phone. He wanted me to get off the interstate and buy him an overpriced one from a truck stop or something. I told him no, I'd get him one when we got into town and that next time he needs to remember to bring one for the house and the car. I suggested making a packing list ahead of time. Now my youngest was in the back with his tablet playing quietly and my oldest realized the tablet was plugged into a car charger. He asked his younger brother for the charger and I told him it's an Apple charger, it won't work with your Android. My oldest said, "You don't know that, shut up." Next thing I know he's forcibly taken the Apple charger and is trying to fit it into his phone. When it didn't work he threw it into the back seat of the truck. My youngest just plugged his tablet back up without a word, but I told my OS that his behavior wasn't acceptable. Fast forward to the next day. OS is still fuming at me because I made him wait. Bad-mouthed me to his grandma etc. I left to go to the office as did my husband, and my Mill was going to take my youngest son to the treat trail for Halloween. She asked OS if he wanted to go and he told her to kick rocks. My husband told OS not to speak to her like that. I knew trouble was brewing, I just didn't know how bad. Apparently, Mill and YS went to the treat trail and OS called Mill to tell her he wanted Hardee's, also known as Carl JRS. My Mill told him there was food at home and that it would be a while before she could get it. OS told her she needed to bring it now. My Mill told him to either eat what was at the house or wait. OS cussed her and hung up on her. Mill called me and I told her not to reward bad behavior. I told her we had plans to go out anyway later to eat, he could wait. So when Mill gets home, she tries to open the door and her key won't work. OS comes to the door and tells her that he's angry and doesn't want her in the house, so he locked her out. He told her to wait outside until he either felt like opening door or until I came home. My Mill told him to open the door ASAP. She called me crying and I went the heel off. I called OS and told him he didn't make the rules in my house. He went by them and that he would be punished if he didn't open the door. He really thought I was playing. I left the office and went home. Cue disaster. I opened the door and OS was there on the other side. Mill and YS had been waiting in her car and OS was blocking threshold, saying he'd told Mill to keep outside, that it was her punishment for telling him no. I told him to move, now. I tried to push past him and he pushed me back outside, threatening to lock us all out. I went to go inside again and he put his hand on my face and pushed me back out. I told him that's it, I'm calling the police. He didn't think I was serious, but I did it. I told the dispatcher that my OS was refusing to let me into my own home and had put his hands on me. OS goes into a rage, and I mean a pure rage. He comes out of the door screaming profanity and threats, tries to take my phone, and the lady tells me she'll send someone ASAP. I mean I had to literally fight him to keep him from breaking my phone. Then he goes after my youngest son. He tells YS that he hates him and is going to kill him because YS caused his life to be awful since he was born, and that OS should be the only one getting anything from me. OS said he was my true son since he was born first and from my first marriage. IDKX Mill bullcrap. My Mill locks YS in her cars and OS proceeds to kick, punch and crack the windows and windshield in her car. OS goes after Mill just as my husband pulls up. He's telling Mill this is her fault, that she just needed to do what he said. My husband tries to restrain OS and OS is screaming he will have my husband arrested etc. The police come and they immediately take over restrain on OS and put him into the back of the van. My husband and I explained the situation, and I told the officer that my ex-Mill had shared custody. So the officer calls ex-Mill and tells her what's happening. He puts her on speaker and she immediately puts the blame on us, saying we provoked him and are abusive to him. The officer told her that didn't seem to be the case as a neighbor had came forward and said she had called 911 also plus had a security camera that showed the entire thing. Ex-Mill jumps to saying the police here can't do anything with OS as he's a resident of another state, blah blah blah. The cop tells ex-Mill that's not the case and it seems like OS needs to learn he's too in control. The officer hangs up and ex-Mill immediately calls me. I put her on speakerphone. She's not the smartest yet thinks she is. Ex-Mill said if I had OS arrested that I would be a bad mom and that he was justified in what he'd said and done. I asked her about the true son thing and she said he was my only heir as he was my first son and from my first marriage and divorce is a sin. I told her that's not how it works. I told her I'm tired of him taking my home over and trying to hurt people. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comments.